It is no secret that racial minorities are overrepresented in the juvenile justice system. In 2013, African Americans made up 16% of the population for youths aged 10 to 17. However, they made up 35% of all youths incarcerated. They were involved in 74.3% of all delinquency cases, and of those, 42% were person offense crimes, meaning they were crimes of robbery, rape, and murder. On top of this harshness, nationwide, African American juveniles were more likely than white juveniles to be detained prior to their court date and to have the court petition for further processing. Likewise, they are more likely to be sentenced to incarceration than given probation than white youths. Some perceive that the juvenile judge's decisions are based on the seriousness of the offense and the prior record of the defendant. However, an analysis found that 25 out of 30 studies conducted in 1989 to 2001 found that race had at least some, if not all, to do with the sentencing. But aside from being offenders, they are victims. It is a vicious cycle, and it has to begin somewhere. For violent crimes, younger age groups seem to be victimized the most. In 2013, the victimization for youths aged 12 to 17 was 30.1% for every 1,000 persons. However, rates do continue to fall as the youth ages. Once a juvenile hits their adult years, 18 to 24, the victimization rate drops to 26.8 per 1,000 persons. In the years 2000 to 2007, the approximate rate dropped about 20%. It dropped from 67% to 41% for violent crimes. But still, in 2010, violence against African American youths was twice the rate of white youths, at a 25.4% per 1,000 persons. African American males, unfortunately, have the greatest likelihood of being victims of robbery at a 9% per 1,000 persons rate. Similarly, African Americans and Hispanic youths are at a greater victimization for assaults with weapons and other crimes dealing with weapons. The victimization rate for crimes with firearms impacts Hispanic youths twice as much as it does for white youths. And not surprisingly, African American rates are even higher than that. In a study of data from the 1995 National Crime Victimization Survey conducted by Janet Lauritsen, found that the differences in family and community impacts violent crime significantly. She even controlled for individual family and community characteristics. A key factor, she found, is single-family or single-parent homes and disadvantaged communities. Time away from home and less stable living conditions has a negative effect and increases the rate of victimization for youths. Unfortunately, youths in these areas seem to be self-dependent earlier on in life and spend less time at home than those that live in affluent or predominantly white neighborhoods. Communities with higher percentages of female-headed households and those who have more residents under the age of 18 experience higher violent victimization rates. Males are more likely to be victims of crimes that involve both strangers and non-strangers. African American and Hispanics are at a greater overall risk for those crimes involving stranger violence. Unfortunately, and saddeningly, African American females are at a greater risk of being victimized by those that they know. In Judy Miller's findings on community and school life for young African American females in St. Louis, Missouri, found they were at a greater risk when they lived in male-dominated neighborhoods. In those neighborhoods, they were subject to witness violence against other women, and they were subject to sexual coercion and sexual assault which their male peers actually found as more persuasion than they did coercion. This results in risk avoidant techniques, such as avoiding certain areas, victim blaming, and seeking male relatives and friends for protection, as well as criticizing other girls who engage in risky behavior or dress in certain manner. Approximately half of these girls, at least age 16, have experienced this issue at least once, and a third have experienced this on multiple occasions. Disappointingly, when these girls try to stand up for themselves, the situation tends to escalate and become a hostile confrontation. And lastly, homicide consistently affects African American males the most. In 2010, 17% of youths were African American, but almost half of all homicides were African American youths, making the rate of homicide for African American youths 5 times the rate of that for white youths. This brings me to the conclusion that high rates of crime correlate with home life and community structure. African American and Hispanic youths often live in these areas and are increasing their victimization rate. The solution, or at least one solution, is to have former justice-involved youths help with the creation of policies in these communities. By having been through the justice system themselves, these youths can provide first-hand information to decision makers about the conditions of juvenile facilities and the effectiveness of programs. They are a valuable resource that empowers youth to create political change and participate in the healing process by telling their stories while serving as a resource for advocates. These rehabilitative efforts and reentry program advisors help youths in need get over the trauma and help them reenter society. Youth community programs, as a preventive measure, may be a good idea. Those programs, such as the League of United Latin American Citizens Youth Leadership Program, may be a good starting point. The League of United Latin American Citizens mission is to advance the economic condition, educational attainment, political influence, housing, health, and civil rights of the Hispanic population in the United States. Their leadership program encourages Hispanic youths to stay in school while providing them with role models, a nurturing environment, and they meet in small groups so that children aren't overwhelmed. However, they are provided to do a leadership project, and this may make youth feel like the community is theirs to heal. However, may not be a bad idea. The organization receives their funding from membership fees and council fees, corporate associations, and donations. So not a drain on the community. For this video, most of my references came from a book, The Color of Justice, Race, Ethnicity, and Crime in America by Samuel Walker, Cassius Fahone, and Miriam DeLone. I also received information from articles on the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice's website. That article was titled, Former Justice-Involved Youths Should Be Key Players in Creating Policy, written by Lauren Barreto. On the same website, I found an article titled, New Report, A Guide to Supporting Justice-Involved Youth During Reentry. Also, I received an article from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention website. It's an article on the Second Chance Act Youth Offender Reentry Program, and as well as the League of United Latin American Citizens website. Thank you.